Welcome to the space between two lines. I'm Alex Saunders, and this is a space for real, honest conversations about fertility, pregnancy loss, and the journey to parenthood. Here, we hear the stories of people navigating the highs, the lows, and everything in between. A place to feel seen, understood, and less alone. Because every story matters, and so does yours. Today, I'm joined by Steph, a mum and the author of The Little Heart That Waited, a beautiful children's book inspired by her journey through secondary infertility. After years of trying, IVF, and multiple transfers, Steph fell pregnant with their son from their very last embryo. In this episode, she shares her story of resilience, hope, and turning heartbreak into something truly meaningful. Welcome to the podcast, Steph. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to be able to share your story today.
Thank you for having me on.
Did you want to start by introducing yourself to our audience and just telling us a little bit about what your life looks like at the moment?
So my name is Stephanie. I'm 33 years old. I recently had, well, I guess it's not recent anymore, actually. He'll be 1 next month, but feels like yesterday that I just had my son after struggling to conceive him for over 3 years. And I've also got an older daughter, Amalia, who's 7 years old.
Yep, amazing. So I wanted to take you back now to the beginning of your conception and fertility journey. So I know that today's focus will be on your secondary infertility journey, but did you want to just talk us through what your life looks like when you did decide you want to have a baby and what that first pregnancy looked like for you?
Yeah, so my husband and I were married, I think, for 2 years. And when we decided it was time to start trying for a baby, we fell pregnant quite quickly. Within 4 months, we were already pregnant. I had no complications. The only complication, I guess, was that she was breech, and I had to have a C-section as a result of that. But other than that, it was a smooth pregnancy. There was no issues. It was really easy to fall pregnant. And yeah, it was just what I thought it would be like to fall pregnant.
Did you want to talk about when you made that decision that it was time to extend your family? And I guess you've spoken about what your preconceived idea was going to be, like what conception would look like. But did you have regular cycles at that time? Were you tracking all those kinds of things?
Yeah, so I was tracking the cycles. I'm not regular on the dot every X amount of days. I'm sort of within a range, but it was always within that range. So it was still quite regular. My daughter was around just over 2.5 years old. And when we started to think, let's try for another one. And then in your head, you sort of do the calculations that, oh, if I fall pregnant at this time, she'll be 3 years old. It'll be a good age gap. And then you keep trying, and then that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was not at all what we experienced the first time around. It was very, very difficult. And it was about a year into it where we decided to start going to the doctor and see if there was anything, any reason why we weren't able to fall pregnant as easily as before. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with either of us. So every test came back normal. I had so many ultrasounds, tubes flushed. My husband did all his tests. Everything was normal. And we just were diagnosed with unexplained secondary infertility.
So how long were you trying for before you decided to seek further fertility support? Obviously, you've gone to your GP, and when they said to you that it was unexplained, did you decide to keep trying naturally, or did you decide to go and seek support through a specialist?
Yeah, so we sort of did both. We wanted to see a specialist straight away, but we still were trying in the meantime, just in case, because I know to get into specialists, sometimes you have to wait a few months anyway. So we tried while we were waiting. Once we were at the specialist and she went through everything, we were still trying throughout the whole process, but nothing worked, unfortunately, until we had that extra help with IVF. I did actually suffer prior to seeing a fertility specialist, a chemical pregnancy. So that was the only other time that we had fallen pregnant. And that was actually pretty early on into our trying, I would say. And then after that, there was absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Wow. And how did you navigate that time of trying, and especially when you did have that chemical pregnancy?
It was really difficult. I think I had a lot of fake smiles, especially for my daughter, who I couldn't really fall apart in front of her. And I just had to, I think I just wanted to find a reason. That was my main thing. I wanted to know why wasn't it happening. And I think I sort of hyper focused on that a lot as well because we were ticking things off, it's not this, it's not that. And I wanted something to blame, but I had nothing, unfortunately.
Yeah, which makes it so hard with secondary infertility. And I'm sure you had those comments of your body's done something once, it'll do it again,
Yes,
but it's just
exactly.
not always the case. And it is such a hard thing to navigate. And how old was your daughter at this time that you decided to go through the IVF path?
She was in kindergarten, so she was 5 years old by that stage. And obviously, as well, for her starting kindergarten, she was seeing all her friends with baby brothers and sisters or older siblings. And she was asking, when am I going to get one? Why don't I have one? So it made it another layer of trying to make it happen for her just as much for us as well.
Yeah. And did you find those conversations with her hard to navigate?
A little bit. I did tell her, we're trying. I tried to include her as much as I could with the IVF process. So often with the injections, she was holding my hand while my husband did the injection for me, just so that, she could see what we were trying to do and how that would hopefully lead us to a baby. She came with me to all the blood tests that I had to do. I think it sort of opened her eyes as well to see that it wasn't as simple as just asking for one and it'll come straight away.
Yeah. And did you want to just talk us through what your IVF journey looked like?
Yes, so I had two egg collections. The first one, I had 20 eggs collected, and then that number sort of dwindled down to 10. And I had from that two frozen embryo transfers that obviously didn't work. And then I had a second egg collection, and I only had 10 from that collected. And then from that 10, I was left with four. But then obviously once they're thawed and they develop, I really was only left with a fresh transfer that didn't work, and I had one last embryo. And that last embryo was my son. It ended up working. We were really stressing out about it though, because we had no backups. We didn't know if we were to go through it again if it didn't work, because the physical and emotional toll of it all. I just kept saying, if this doesn't work, I don't think I can do this again. It's just too much. So I was really, really scared going into that last embryo transfer. And I was also scared that they were going to call me and say it didn't survive the thawing process and that there was nothing left. But luckily I got there and they didn't say anything. So I'm like, okay, we're okay for now. And I made it through to the transfer and then just was holding on to hope all the way through that wait before we could have any tests. And then that ended up being our son. So it was a very big shock, I think.
Yeah, I could imagine. And I think going through IVF, like every step carries so much weight. So even little things like stressing that your frozen embryo like won't survive being thawed. It's like these are little things that people would just have no idea about. Like it's not just the stress of like, oh yeah, doing IVF, it's your egg collection and then it's your numbers. And then it's like, will my frozen embryo even survive? Like, will we even get there? And then will it take? And I'm
Yeah.
sure it would have been a super scary time, especially because that original transfer didn't work.
Yeah, I guess at that stage it was my first fresh transfer because the previous two were frozen. So I thought, oh, maybe this might be the one that will work. The frozen ones didn't work, so maybe the fresh one will be the one that works.
Yeah.
And so I thought I did have a little bit more hope with that one because it was new. I hadn't done it before. And then when that also failed, it was like, oh, like, well, what do we do now?
Yeah. So it was your fourth transfer that you fell pregnant with your son in the end?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And like through something that was completely unexplained, like when you've fallen pregnant before. Like it's just, and I'm sure there's so many other people that are going through similar situations, but it's just a bit mind boggling, isn't it?
It is, and even for the fertility specialist, she was even trying to figure out what it could be. She was struggling to think of what other things to test for or what else, we could do. I even had from my C-section in one of the ultrasounds, they saw that I had a C-section niche, which I'm not sure if you know much about that, but it was only a couple of millimeters. It's a little fluid pocket that sort of builds within that scar region, and it can cause infertility. So I even had that repaired in the hopes that maybe that was what was causing the issue, even though it was so tiny. And they said, it's not it's not big enough really to cause a problem, but to tick it off, we should maybe get it repaired. So I even did that in the hopes that maybe that was the thing that was causing the infertility, but it made no difference really.
Yeah, gosh, what a journey. A huge part of having you on here today is obviously you had a long conception journey, but you've recently released a beautiful children's book and it's called The Little Heart That Waited. And I think that it is something that'll be so helpful for our listeners, especially anyone on that secondary infertility journey and might be trying to navigate speaking to their little ones about what's going on. I think it's just a really great way to communicate with them. So, did you want to first and foremost, I mean, you've obviously talked a little bit about it, chatting about your story, but tell us what really inspired you to write and publish this book?
Yeah, so I initially just had written it as a way to release my own emotions. So it started in sections when we were trying to conceive. I sort of started writing this poem to help with my own emotions. And then as things progressed, I sort of added to it. And then when we fell pregnant with my son, that was just a whole nother world of emotions. So I just kept sort of adding to it along the way. And I mainly wanted it as something to give to my children as a way of showing them what we went through to have our son, and also for my daughter to see what me and my husband went through for her as well, to try and give her a sibling. So I just wanted to put those emotions out in a different outlet than normal, and then turn it into a book, something physical that, they can have forever, and hopefully help some other people out along the way.
Yeah, so beautiful. You've done some amazing work, and I personally read it to my son, and it's just, yeah, it's really, really beautiful. So,
Thank you.
thank you for publishing something like this for families going through this kind of thing because I mean, I'm sure there are other things out there, but it's the first thing I've seen that I could actually communicate with my son who doesn't really quite, he's 3, so he really can't quite understand.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's just a really beautiful way, even showing pictures and things like that. Can you share the meaning behind the title and the cover of the book for us?
sure. So I named the book The Little Heart That Waited, sort of in a twofold way. One of them being my daughter, her little heart waiting for a sibling. And the second one was because my son was that last embryo. So he was that little heart waiting to join our family as well. So I just thought that was the most, I don't even know what the word is, but the most perfect title to explain both of them. And it was something that took a long time to sort of think of, but I think that's where we landed, and it was really, really good. And with the cover, I was struggling actually to think about what the cover should be for the book. I knew I wanted my daughter to sort of be gazing out of a window, sort of waiting for something. But there was one afternoon where she was playing outside and she came running inside and she said, Mum, there's a cloud in the shape of a heart. And I just knew that had to be part of the book cover. And it was funny because it was literally when I was about to email my illustrator to discuss, what I want the cover to be. And she just came in the nick of time, and it was just like it was meant to be.
How did your daughter react when she read the book for the first time?
I didn't tell her about it at all when I was writing it. And when I handed it to her, she sort of looked like, oh, this looks like me. And then when she opened it and she saw the dedication and she saw her name and my son's name in it, she was just gobsmacked. And as she read it, she was just so amazed. She was asking did I draw the pictures? I said I wish, but it was my beautiful illustrator, Kat Richardson. And by the time she finished reading it, she had said to me that it was the best gift she's ever gotten besides her baby brother. So that alone meant the world to me.
Yeah, and something that she's gonna be able to keep forever as well.
Exactly, yeah.
How long did it take you in total to write and publish the book? Because you said you started, kind of throughout your journey. So how long did it take to come to life?
I think about 2 years. So I think I started writing it after a year of trying. I started then putting my feelings into the book as a way of coping. And then I had to sort of stop it for a long time because there was nothing else happening, nothing new to report. And then once I fell pregnant with my son, I started to look back into it again and then start writing that next phase of being pregnant and what that was like for my daughter to have that moment to talk to the baby inside my belly and all those little things. And then had to wait obviously until my son was born to then complete the book. So I'd say around 2 to 2.5 years in total it took to actually write it. And then within the last 6 months, just looking for an illustrator to then illustrate the images and then finally get it published.
Yeah. Wow. And what messages do you hope readers can take away after they read the book?
I mainly just want them to know that they're not alone. In my fertility journey, I didn't see many books written about this situation where you've got a child already who's longing to become a sibling or the family and what they're going through to try to make that happen. I just thought that there was a bit of a gap in the market for that. I see books about IVF specifically or about babies being in the NICU specifically, but haven't seen any that talk about secondary infertility and how the parents cope with that and how the child copes with that. So I just sort of wanted to write it as a way for other families to know that they aren't the only ones going through it. And it does feel that way. It does feel very isolating at times, but I just wanted to put it out there for other families to know that they're not alone and that there can be a light at the end of the tunnel once you do get that baby in your arms.
Yeah, such an important thing to put out there. I think it's also great at just kind of expressing the emotions that a family goes through secondary infertility and the emotions of a little one as well. That's what I took from the book too. Like it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, again, there's nothing really out there that is similar to this, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then what was the most challenging part of your journey to growing your family, do you think?
The most challenging part was obviously not knowing what was causing the fertility issues. That was probably the most challenging. After that would be having a child that, you desperately want to make them a sibling and you want to give them all these things and they keep bringing it up. And it was hard to sort of keep your emotions in check while also try and explain to them what was happening. And the other thing that I think was really hard was seeing everybody else's life go on and have multiple kids. And I think I counted in the whole time that we were trying to conceive our second baby, there were 20 people who I knew who had already either had their first baby or subsequent babies. And so I just felt like my life was on hold. And I think that was the most challenging thing as well. We couldn't really plan for the future because we didn't know what that would be. We couldn't really go on big holidays because I didn't know if my cycle or IVF cycle would fall during that time. I think just, yeah, being in that limbo stage and then also people, their comments as well was very challenging. A lot of people would say, "Oh, you should be grateful that you have one already." And that sort of triggers you because, of course, I'm grateful that I have one. And that's the reason why it makes me even more sad because I know exactly what I'm missing out on. I know what the first cry sounds like, the first laugh, seeing all the little milestone moments. Like I knew exactly what I was missing out on. And I feel like maybe I took it for granted the first time around because I just assumed that it would happen again. So that was very challenging and having to sort of deal with people's comments that were unhelpful along the way.
Yeah. Was there anything else that really stood out for you? Because again, like that piece around we should be grateful for what you've got, and of course you are, but it doesn't take away the grief of how you've pictured your life and your life not going in that direction and then navigating everyone around you having what you want to have. Like it really doesn't take away your pain and the want for another child. And I think that's just, I had the same thing when I was going through it, and it's just a really hard thing to navigate. And I found those conversations really hard to navigate as well. And then on top of that, you're having to show up as a mum when you're grieving all of these things and you're wanting to show up, give everything you've got to being a mum, but you've also got this heartache and grief on the side. How did you navigate that time? Was there anything that you lent on to try and get through it, or you just kind of took it day by day?
I took it day by day. I did also try to shield my daughter from it as much as possible, but there were times where I would break down in front of her. And I think more towards that sort of when we had been trying for 3 years, I couldn't really hold in the emotions in front of her anymore because she would say things and then I would just start crying. And it got to the point where I would cry about not being pregnant, and my daughter would say, "Is it because of the baby?" And I would say, "Yes, it is." And she would just hug me and hold me. So I think she also helped me as well get through it a lot, but it was really hard. I couldn't really, after a while, it was hard to just keep having that wall for her, even though I really wanted to be strong. But I think it was important for her to also see the emotional side of it as well.
Yeah, for sure. But how did you navigate your second pregnancy once you did find out you were pregnant? Did you find that challenging or was that okay for you?
So I was just petrified. I was scared because if something was to happen, we had no backup. I didn't want to go through it all over again. And I think I was just very cautious. We didn't tell our families until I was close to 3 months because I was scared that something was going to happen. I also experienced a quite a heavy bleed when I was about 8 weeks pregnant, and I had to go to the emergency because it was just so traumatic. I don't know if you had experience, but when you have the embryo transfer, you have to insert progesterone. I don't know if you had to do that as well, but when you do that, you can sort of feel like the excess sort of leaking out every now and then. So that happened one day. So I went to the bathroom and it turns out it was just blood gushing out of me. It was horrible, and in that moment, my heart sank. I just went white. We went to the emergency. They weren't very helpful, really. We were there for hours and hours for a doctor to just, like, push on my stomach and say, "Oh, it does sound like you're having a miscarriage," and give me a referral for 2 days later for an ultrasound. So I was just, like, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. Even though I told him I had no pain, there were no clots, nothing, he still said, "Yeah, it sounds like it's a miscarriage. Here's a referral, off you go." And so that was just traumatic. And we managed to get a referral for the very next day instead, just to put our mind at ease. And when we got there, we just said to the sonographer, just tell us, like, put us out of our misery, because we were obviously expecting the worst with that. And then she was having a little look, and then she played the heartbeat, and my husband and myself burst out crying because we thought we had lost the baby. And especially with the doctor as well saying, "Oh, it sounds like a miscarriage," we had no hope. So we were just, like, all the emotions just let out in that room. We were just so relieved that our little baby had hung on after all of that.
Yeah. And did they give you a reason for the bleed?
No, so they tried to look for the I can't remember
The
what they called it.
hematoma.
Yeah, the
Hematoma.
hematoma. They
Yeah.
tried looking for that. They said there was nothing. They said sometimes the progesterone might scratch, inside somewhere to cause bleeding, but the amount that came out, that there was no way it could have been that. So it was just, they had no reason once again. So it was a bit scary because I was worried it was going to happen again, which it did actually happen again, but not as bad. but still quite a lot of blood. So again, I didn't go to the hospital that time. I just went to my GP. They gave me the referral. And again, we went to the sonographer. Everything was fine, thankfully, but still no reason why it was happening. So it just made me feel extra cautious the whole way through, especially those first 3 months where, you can lose the baby, unfortunately. So we just kept it to ourselves. And then we told our parents and our family once we had reached that 3-month stage just to be safe.
Yeah. I had a bleed early on with my pregnancy too, and my fertility clinic told me after the fact that it's really quite common with IVF to have like, I had a hematoma, but I had no idea what it was at the time, and then for pretty much the rest of my first trimester, I was just constantly going to the toilet and looking for blood, like, it
Yes.
was
Yeah.
awful, and and it happened earlier for me, so, not as traumatic as it probably was for you, but still, like, there was just nothing they could do as well. It's just like you could be having a miscarriage, you might not, and I just think that just added to the anxiety, like, you've been through so much, and then on top of that, you have a bleed, and I just think, yeah, I've heard that it is quite common, and I've spoken to other people going through IVF, and it is something that can happen, so I guess just for our listeners to just, you can still hold on to some hope
Yeah.
if it does happen, and I think people in the emergency department sometimes need to be a little bit more sensitive as well.
Yes.
I've heard some quite horrific stories of the way that people have been treated there, so that would have been really challenging. At what point did you just decide to tell your daughter?
We actually told her on her birthday. So I would have been about 2 months pregnant at that stage. And we set up a little treasure hunt for her. So there were clues around the house leading her to different areas. And then the last clue was leading to the dining table where there was a box with a t-shirt that said only child crossed out and big sister. So that was how we told her, and she was so excited. I think she was shocked, first of all. She was like, "Are you having a baby?" And then I said, "Yeah, mommy's got a baby." And then she was so happy. So she just hugged my tummy. It was such a sweet moment with her.
That's so beautiful. Did it scare you telling her? Because I still
Yes.
now, being where I am in pregnancy, still get nervous about, like, my son talking about his baby brother. Like, I still have this like, I'm still so scared that something's gonna happen, and I can't comprehend explaining that to him. Did you have any of those feelings?
Yeah, I mean, I did, but I just wanted to give her something positive for once to be excited about. So we did sort of tell her, you can't tell everyone because it's still very, very early, but we just wanted to let her know something positive for once instead of seeing me down or having to explain what we were doing again. And I wanted to just let her know on her birthday something extra special that she would hopefully always remember.
And is there anything else that you wanted our listeners to know that might be navigating a similar path through secondary infertility? Is there any advice you have for them or just any messages that you wanted to send to them?
I know how isolating it can feel. I know how hard it is to have to show up for your child every day, have to show up to work every day, and, all the events, baby showers, birthdays, all the things that you would hope to have for yourself. And I know that it's a horrible thing to go through, even though you already have that child, but like you said, you're mourning what could have been. So I just want listeners to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. If you are feeling a certain way, that there are people that have gone through it that are more than happy to sit with you and talk to you about it. One thing that my husband and I did watch that we thought was helpful for us was a comedy show on Netflix called Life by Andrew Schultz. And he sort of touches on an IVF journey in a comedic fashion. So it kind of put a little bit of light on the situation that's always so dark and heavy for some. And the way he explained everything and the process, it was just a bit of a relief to have someone on a big stage sort of making light of something that is really emotional and hard to go through and very, very relatable. So I think that's a really great watch for anyone that has gone through IVF. and his wife had to go through it, and it was a really good show. So I'd recommend that as well, just something to lighten the load because it is quite a heavy thing to go through. And, any time that you can find some sort of way of coping and not have to be so sad about it all the time, that you can have a little bit of a laugh, that's something really important as well.
And most importantly, where can people find and purchase your book?
So it is available on Amazon, on Booktopia, and you can also get it through my website, which is stephaniemancini.square.site. And yeah, I think if you just pop it in Google, there's a few other places you can get it from, but those are the main ones.
Yeah, amazing. And we'll pop all of that in our show notes as well so people have the link. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your story, and then also sharing your amazing book with our community. I highly recommend. It's a really beautiful story. And as I said, something really beautiful you can share with your family if you are navigating this or even if you're on the other side of it. Yeah, it's really special.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
This has been The Space Between Two Lines. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and register on our website to share your story. The link is in the bio. Until next time.